Hey, what's up, YouTube? Um, I've been really surprised at how popular my last video about the Hasbro Boba Fett Black Series helmet has been. And really, the thing that people seem to be responding best to is that I compared it to the EFX Precision Cast Replica helmet. So I thought, let's do a video that focuses more on that comparison, because those are right now the two primarily available helmets that you have to choose from. So here on the right, that is the Hasbro Black Series helmet. Here on the left, that is the EFX PCR helmet. So first off, I want to say how thoroughly impressed I am with the Hasbro helmet. The Boba Fett costume is notoriously difficult to capture. There's so much paint to it. There's so many little details. There are so many different materials. And I think Hasbro did a fantastic job trying to replicate that and still keep the price point affordable. So, awesome. I can't say enough good things about this helmet, about the Black Series. That wasn't an easy feat. So I think the first thing to kind of discuss in comparing the two is their lineage. So both helmets have some degree of lineage to the screen used prop. I want to say about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years at this point in time, a member of the RPF and who also worked for EFX was able to actually take a direct cast off of the screen used Empire Strikes Back Boba Fett helmet. That video is still up on YouTube, and you can find it. I'll see if I can find a link to it and post it in the description. So the PCR helmet, that is a direct cast off of the existing prop. So that's really about as close as you're going to get in terms of lineage. And they were able to retain a lot of the wonkiness that kind of goes with the Boba Fett helmet. It has sort of a funky T-visor, with sort of like a wavy effect to the upper brow. And that's just always been part of the helmet. A lot of Star Wars props, the actual screen used ones, are, for lack of a better term, wonky. If you've ever looked at the screen used Darth Vader helmet from A New Hope, oh my, that is just incredibly asymmetrical. And, they were all hand sculpted and cast. So again, it's just part of what makes these props awesome. So EFX cast the Boba Fett helmet, and it really, I think they tried to retain as much of that original detail as possible. And that video is worth checking out too. Hasbro did a laser scan of the helmet too. So they did a laser scan of the prop. Laser scans typically, as I understand it, are pretty effective, but they don't capture quite as much detail. Years ago, when Master Replicas did a helmet, they also laser scanned it. However, they scanned the wrong helmet. They thought they had the actual Empire Strikes Back helmet. Turns out they had one of the pre-production helmets, which was painted to look very similar. But neither here nor there. But so one of the things with the Hasbro helmet, they did clean up some of that wonkiness. So this helmet is really pretty symmetrical. And another thing that I've noticed is the visor on the Hasbro helmet. It's definitely a little bit taller compared to the EFX. And I tend to think that that's probably more of a safety concern, because even though these helmets are geared towards more mature collectors, they're still going to get into the hands of kids, and they still have to be viewable through that visor, and it has to be safe. So I tend to think that was a concession that was made for safety concerns, so that way you still had full visibility through that visor. And it's so minor. Honestly, like, if I weren't looking at them side by side, I probably wouldn't even see it. There's also a very slight difference in the shape of the dome. So the EFX has a very slight kind of flat spot to the dome, whereas the Hasbro is a little bit more uniformly round. And I think that's probably just from that process of making them symmetrical. But they are very, very similar. And I do have a tape measure here, so we can kind of take a look to see dimensions. So the Hasbro one's, the EFX one, probably right around like 10.5 inches. So I have to tell with that angle, but. And then the Hasbro one at its tallest point, probably about that same thing, 10.5 inches. And we're looking at the width here. The EFX one is just about 9 inches wide. And same thing with the Hasbro. So overall, their dimensions are virtually identical. Very, very similar. You know, granted, I make the laziest videos in the universe. I'm capturing this on my phone, so I'm trying to balance my phone and the measuring tape at the same time. So there's probably some variability there. Forgive me. One thing that the EFX helmet does have over the Hasbro, and this just has to do with the price point, but these parts here, like the ear cap and the rangefinder, those are actually metal pieces. So those are all metal on this. I believe this one is too. So those are machined aluminum. And I mean, frankly, you can't really tell that very much. Like, you can't, it's not an obvious visual difference when you compare the two. But, you know, it's one of those things that you know, and I've slowly started to turn from just sort of cast made replicas of things to trying to get replicas that have a lot of the real metal parts, because there is something to be said about the feel of the real metal parts. So if you're looking for screen accuracy, that might be a determining factor. Whereas the Hasbro one, it's again, it has that toyetic quality to it. So theirs is made out of plastic. I think the boarding connector is metal. Well, actually, that might be plastic. It looks metal though. They did a good job replicating that because it looks almost identical to the one on the EFX. But that is something to consider. But again, pretty big difference in the price point. $120 for the Hasbro one versus I've seen this one up to $400. And somebody who commented on the Black Series said that in France, the EFX one is going for up to $500. So I don't know if having metal parts is that important to you. Overall detail of the helmet, similar. It's going to be kind of hard to see in this lighting, but the EFX one has a replica of the calculator board that was included in the back. So it's an MQ1 calculator. And you can kind of just ever so lightly make out there's like that little box sitting behind the vents. Whereas the Hasbro one, that just has the cutout for the liner inside. And there's sort of like a crosshatch pattern in there that you can see when light hits it. And that's a really minor detail, but that's kind of the point of this where I'm just pointing this out. The rangefinders are similar, but again, you're going to see that the EFX one actually has the clear acrylic in here compared to the Hasbro one, which is just painted plastic. And there's also a very slight difference in the shape. So you can see that on EFX, there's slopes and angles downward, whereas the Hasbro one just kind of ends here and the black frame is molded into it, whereas that's a separate piece on here. They both have some light up functionality. So at the EFX, you have to manually slide that rangefinder down. On the Black Series one, you hit the button and it drops down. According to EFX, they actually went back and studied the wiring of the LEDs in the screen use helmet. So the flashing pattern is accurate to how it would have flashed in the movie if that was visible. Whereas the Hasbro one is just sort of like a, slightly slower blinking. And then the Hasbro one also has the slide out rangefinder top, so you can see the targeting piece. And that, again, comes back to toyetic qualities. Like, are you going to play with this, or is it going to be a display piece? For me, I display both of them. I actually have been using the EFX helmet on my Slideshow life-size Boba Fett, because I have one of the first releases of that, and the helmet was just freakishly small. This is the helmet over here. It's about an inch in every dimension smaller. And in terms, again, of fine detail, the Hasbro Black Series, of course, has the sculpted interior. And I removed the helmet lining just because otherwise it won't fit on my giant head. But you can see it has that cool sculpted detail, similar to the Rydell helmet from years ago, which was later remade by Master Replicas. So again, this is the Hasbro one. It has those soft pads. And the EFX helmet, that just has kind of the flat inside and some foam inserts on the side, which is super thin foam. One interesting thing to note is that I find the Hasbro helmet to be a little bit sturdier, and the plastic feels heavier and more solid. And that, again, is probably one of those safety things where they knew that kids are going to be wearing this, and they're probably going to be bopping each other on the head with toy lightsabers and things. So they had to make it a more substantial plastic. Whereas the EFX helmet is much lighter, even with those machined aluminum parts. It's really light. The plastic feels really thin. So in your hands, I have to be honest, the EFX feels kind of cheap, especially compared to the Black Series helmet. But that's the type of thing that you're not going to know it unless you're picking them up and you're looking at them thoroughly and feeling them. So, of course, probably the most iconic part of the helmets are the paint jobs. And they were both based off of the Empire Strikes Back screen use prop. And, I mean, really, Hasbro did a great job. Is it as detailed as the EFX? Nope, it is not. And that's to be expected. But it's definitely much more detailed than I would have expected. The EFX has more variation in its color. Also, it has kind of silver tones in there too. And you can see it has kind of like a light spray on it to simulate dirt and wear. When you look at the dent, you can see there are a few different gray tones in there. So you have your silver base coat with a light gray, a dark gray. You get some scratches in there. Of course, you have that fading of yellow to orange for the kill stripes. And Same thing on the cheekbones here, where you just have more defined colors and more detail in there. I would say the most detailed part of the helmet is the back. And EFX really tried to get as much of the detail of the screen used prop as possible. However, it still does not have the thumbprints. On the actual screen prop, there's like a white thumbprint, I think right about here, and there's a little bit of a smudge, which I've thought about putting in there just for fun, but haven't done that yet. The other thing that on the EFX, the colors are all really well defined. And that's probably the one thing that I would say about the print job of the Hasbro is that maybe just because of the overall color of the helmet, those darker grays are really kind of hard to pick up. And when you look at it from a distance, it sort of fades together. But you still have some different tones. So again, kind of comparing the dent to the EFX, you have the sort of silver base coat, and then like a dark gray in there. But it doesn't have the light gray. One interesting thing that I've noticed Hasbro did with the print job on this helmet was if you look at the dark gray, it has sort of like a little drop shadow applied to it all over. And all I can think is that that's there to try to replicate the look of a layered paint job. So it all over, anytime you see that dark gray, it has that fine drop shadow, and that's all over the helmet. So that's not something that was a paint error on mine, I don't think, because you can see it anywhere where it has like those multiple tones of silver or gray. So I just thought that was an interesting detail. Mine does have, as I pointed out in the other video, kind of a weird paint error where the kill stripes drop down. And I'd kind of thought about exchanging it, but for one thing, it makes it unique. You know, this is probably the only one like that, or at least the only one that'll pop up for a while. And right now it is April of 2020, and there's a lot of weird stuff going on in the world. And I just don't feel as though it's responsible to go out simply because I want to exchange a helmet with a slight paint defect. So I'm not going to worry about it. But to show you the back, you know, Hasbro was able to capture that really detailed look pretty well. I'll show you the back of the two helmets together. Yeah, I mean, really from this angle, the two helmets look super similar. And you can see that there's maybe just a little bit more detail on the EFX. But, you know, I've been seeing a lot of people ask, well, is the Hasbro one close enough? Is the EFX one the one to get? And it really, I'm going to say it comes down to your own preference. You know, I recognize that the EFX one is pricey, and the Hasbro one is really, really good for the price that you're going to pay. Clearly, I'm a Boba Fett fan, so I wanted to have both of them in my collection. But for the average person who doesn't feel the sort of slavish need to own every Boba Fett helmet, yeah, I mean, honestly, the Hasbro one is probably a close enough representation that it's a good way to save yourself a few $100, but still have a really solid helmet. But I hope that was some help to everybody. And, you know, obviously, if anybody has any questions, please don't be shy. Leave a question in the comments, and I always try to get back to them. Thanks for watching.